Welcome to the AI-powered reader, your shortcut to unlocking the world's best books. Get ready to absorb key insights, understand core concepts, and expand your knowledge all in a fraction of the time. Let's dive in.
Greetings and welcome to our deep dive on opinions, a decade of arguments, critiques, and minding other folks' business by Roxane Gay. This book brings together a decade of the author's opinion writing, with essays on everything from police brutality to the Fast and Furious franchise. It is written for readers seeking thoughtful and provocative writing to help parse complex issues and find community in times of social upheaval. The collection explores essential questions facing our culture today. How does a writer express outrage and bear witness in a fraught political climate? What is the connective tissue linking the major social and cultural shifts of the last 10 years? Guiding us through this landscape is Roxane Gay, a contributing opinion writer for the New York Times and the author of New York Times best-selling books such as Bad Feminist and Hunger, solidifying her status as a voice not just worth hearing, but one we cannot afford to ignore.
Have you ever wondered why the call for civility in arguments sometimes feels off? Or why talking about racism can feel so incredibly repetitive? And who, in our culture, really gets to be angry? Well, for the writer Roxane Gay, an opinion isn't just some casual thought. It's a tool. It's how she bears witness, channels her outrage, or shows her admiration. It's really the heart of everything she does. And her incredible collection, Opinions, brings together a whole decade of her most powerful work. And to really get the force behind that voice, just look at her resume. We're talking best-selling author, a go-to writer for the New York Times, a professor, she even wrote for Marvel. Roxane Gay is without a doubt one of the most important cultural critics of our generation. So where does that fierce, confident voice come from? Well, as she explains it, it started early. She actually credits her mom for showing her what it looked like to have strong beliefs, and crucially, the courage to say them out loud. That example was what inspired her to start turning her own quiet thoughts into these really powerful public arguments. Now, it's so important to remember that these opinions weren't formed in some quiet academic bubble, no way. This collection covers a decade of just massive upheaval. We're talking pre-Trump America, the rise of a fractured political climate, a global pandemic, and the ongoing fight for reproductive rights. Gay's writing is a real-time response to a world that was, and is, constantly changing. All right, so here's our plan for today. We're going on a guided tour of this amazing collection. We're going to map out her arguments, dig deep into 3 essential truths she brings to light, look at what makes the book so brilliant, and then wrap up with some important critiques and things to consider. First up, let's get the lay of the land. How in the world do you organize a decade of your own thoughts? Well, Gay gives us a kind of intellectual map. She organizes the book into these 5 big thematic sections. She takes us from the raw urgency of the matter of Black lives right into the political wrestling match of civic responsibilities. She dives headfirst into patriarchy with man problems, and then, and this is what's so cool, she pivots with total ease to pop culture in minding other folks' business. Okay, now that we have the map, let's head straight for the heart of the collection and explore 3 absolutely essential truths that are woven throughout her work. So this first truth takes on a question that she comes back to over and over again. Why is it that the demand for civility, especially in really heated public debates, so often feels like a weapon? And her answer is just razor sharp. She argues that the call for civility usually isn't about having a respectful conversation. It's really a demand for silence, aimed right at the people who are challenging the way things are. Let's unpack that, because it's a huge point. Gay argues that when you demand civility from people protesting police brutality or from women fighting for control over their own bodies, what you're really doing is shutting down valid anger. It's a trick to reframe their righteous protest as just bad manners, all to protect a system that benefits those already in power. The second essential truth gets right to the emotional core of her essays on race, and it asks a question that feels so personal, but also universal. Why does writing about racism feel like you're stuck in this painful, never-ending loop? And her answer is just devastatingly simple. The writing feels repetitive because the injustice is repetitive. She's forced to make the same arguments, to mourn the same kinds of tragedies, because society keeps repeating the same toxic patterns year after year, generation after generation. And that's what makes this so powerful. It's not a failure of her imagination as a writer. It's a mirror she's holding up to a world that just won't change. You know, when she writes about Sandra Bland back in 2015, those arguments feel like they could have been written this morning. The repetition is the tragedy.
Okay, her third and final essential truth asks a question that really cuts across the entire book. In our society, who actually has permission to be angry?
Gay points out this sharp and, frankly, infuriating double standard. When women, and especially Black women, show anger, they're so often dismissed. They're called irrational, or too emotional, or even threatening.
So here's the bottom line. Anger is not treated as a universal right. Its legitimacy is completely policed based on who you are. Gay shows how female anger gets shut down, while the anger from certain men in power is often seen as authentic or strong. Anger, she's telling us, is a powerful tool, but not everyone is allowed to pick it up.
So, we've explored these core ideas. But beyond that, what makes this collection a true masterclass in cultural criticism? Let's get into the book's unflinching brilliance.
I mean, this slide just says it all. The range here is absolutely stunning. In one essay, she's grappling with the unimaginable trauma of racist terrorism and the moral maze of forgiveness, and in the next, she's writing with pure joy and whip-smart analysis about the Fast and Furious movies. Being able to shift between that kind of tragedy and that kind of fun with the same level of intelligence, that's what makes her a brilliant critic.
And the engine driving that range is her voice. Gay says that on the page, she can be the boldest, most audacious version of herself. That raw honesty, that wit, that absolute refusal to back down. It creates this incredible connection with the reader. You feel like you're not just reading an argument, you're in a conversation with a real person.
Another one of the book's greatest strengths is just how startlingly relevant it is. It's almost chilling, really. You can pick up an essay from 2015 about police brutality, or one from 2016 about political division, and it feels like it could have been written this morning. Her work doesn't just capture a decade, it diagnoses these deep, timeless fractures in our culture.
But of course, no book is beyond critique. So to really get a full, nuanced picture of this collection, it's important to look at some of the common critiques and considerations. One thing that comes up, and it's something Gay herself talks about, is that feeling of repetition. We've already said it's a reflection of reality, but as a reading experience, does it risk just wearing the reader out?
This quote really gets right to the heart of it. The repetition is the entire point, but man, it can be emotionally heavy. Reading essay after essay about similar kinds of injustice is a really powerful experience, but it's a demanding one. It's not a flaw in the writing itself, but a direct reflection of the relentless problems she's facing head-on.
It's also key to remember the format here. This isn't a single book with one long developing argument. It's a collection of essays written over 10 years, so you should go in expecting a mosaic of ideas, these incredibly powerful snapshots in time, not a single straight line from A to B. And finally, there's just the emotional weight of it all. Honestly, getting through this book requires stamina. It's not a light read. It asks you, the reader, to sit with some really uncomfortable, painful truths. And that can be challenging, but it's also an incredibly worthwhile thing to do. Which really brings us to one last huge question. I mean, let's face it, we are drowning in opinions every single day. There's just this constant flood of noise. So in the middle of all that, what makes one voice, what makes Roxane Gay's voice actually worth listening to? I think maybe the answer is that combination of sharp intellectual rigor and this deep, profound humanity. Her opinions are never just hot takes. They're carefully considered, they're born from her own experience, and they are delivered with an unflinching honesty that just forces you to pay attention. She makes you think, and she makes you feel. And maybe most importantly, she reminds us all that in a world where it's so easy to feel like you're drowning, having an opinion, a real, thought-out opinion, is a way to stay engaged. And that's a responsibility none of us can afford to ignore.
That's all for this episode of the AI-Powered Reader. We hope today's summary sparked new ideas and brought you valuable insights. If you enjoyed what you heard, please subscribe wherever you get your podcasts and consider leaving a review. It really helps others discover the show. Until next time, keep learning, keep growing, and keep reading, or rather listening.